Welcome back. Back down here in the basement. A little bit cold. I'm wearing a jacket because I had to turn off the heat. Otherwise, you'd hear the heater that's right over there just blowing the whole time. We are talking about, in this series of videos, the equipment that I use and things that I like about it. Not product reviews, not showing you everything about it. I'm not trying to give an example. I'm just telling you, for someone who's interested in watching, what I'm doing, what I have, and why I use it. We're talking about lenses this time. I have several lenses. There's a brand new lens that I just got a few days ago on this camera currently right next to my head, which I'm really excited about. But before we get to that, this is what I have been shooting on. The first lens I ever used to shoot video with was the Canon CN-E, a photography lens, f2.8, just the first version, because I was buying these secondhand, like most things until I started getting into video. All my photography stuff I bought secondhand because it's cheaper and I didn't have any money. Still don't really. But if I get, this is what I started shooting the wildlife videos on. When I first started, I got the Pocket Cinema 6K. I was using this because this is what I already had. I did have something bigger, but we'll get to that in a minute. Definitely wouldn't work with that. I think it'll work with this now, but jumping ahead of myself. This is what I shot for the first part with an extender. And then I realized it wasn't getting what I wanted to. Even if I cropped in, the footage would just not look great. It didn't have enough reach. Is the best that I could do. I was trying to get small birds, especially kingfishers back in Georgia when I was doing those wetlands videos. So probably none of that footage made it into the videos that exist from the 70-200. Even with an extender, it just wasn't far enough. It wasn't coming out the way I wanted it to. I wanted more. And then we got our first stimulus, and I'd been saving up for a long time. That was after I bought the Pocket Cinema, which is kind of where we got that first stimulus check and where the money for that came from. And I started diving into videography as opposed to still photography. I bought the Canon 100-400. And I do have a ring on there. This right here is so that it can grip from the video camera, so you can pull focus. You'd be using autofocus if you were doing still photography with it. This has been great. This is what I've been shooting on for months, going on a year. I bought this not quite summer of last year. I was shooting those videos before we moved to Wyoming, so May and June is when I got this. It's been fantastic. It's got a lot of reach to it. It's not the most wide open lens. And that is a whole topic that, honestly, I will just mention briefly, and you should look into if you're interested. There are plenty of videos explaining this with much better detail and things like that. But basically, the inside of a lens has irises that open and close. And the further open you get, the more light it lets in, and that's the bigger f-stop number. I said on the last one, the 70-200, it is an f2.8. This one, I don't remember off the top of my head. I think it's somewhere in the 4 is the widest open it can get, so it's half of what the other one. Not quite. Half of it would be 5.6, but anyway. That lens has been fine. That's what I've shot everything up until this point on. It's worked all right. It's definitely better for things when you specifically go, okay, I can see wildlife, for me anyway, and I can zoom in on that, and then I can start recording at that point. As far as transitions, not so much, because in order to, when that's on the lens, I only have two hands, and one hand is usually on the back of the camera where the handle is, trying to control it as far as getting the image where I need it to be. So the left hand is usually up here on the focus wheel, or when I was using this lens, it would have to be zooming. If I zoom, I can't also have a third hand on there to rotate the focus. Or I suppose if it was on here, it would be me trying to do this while also trying to do this to get focus. So a lot of the shots, if you've seen, especially the behind the scenes footage, because for the most part, when I put it at the end of a vlog and I go, here it is, I try to crop out that stuff. I cut out the bad parts where it's out of focus, and I cut once I'm getting into focus. You're never going to see any of the footage before where I was able to zoom in and out while adjusting focus at the same time. Just not possible. But physically, I don't have that many hands. Which almost brings us to this, but before we get to that, The other lens that I'm going to be using, now that I've got a bigger, badder tripod and things that will handle heavy, big stuff, I got this a few years ago at this point. This has been amazing. This is the Canon 300mm f2.8. So again, the best, these white ones especially, the best ones go 2.8 because 2.8 is about as wide as you're ever going to get, and it's good. That really helps with some nice clarity. It's got a lot more reach as a 300. I will be putting this onto this body as soon as I can make sure it's safely secured and it's not going to be too heavy or pulling, because that's a big thing you want to watch for. Is everything basically puts weight onto this right here where the lens clamps into it, and it's just metal on metal, you know, it's locked into place. But if it pulls too much, it could actually, I've seen, it's more still photography, I've never seen it with a video camera online, but people have put too much weight, not stabilized it, not put any kind of support on there to keep it fully in line, and when it's too much, it could actually pull out, and that would break my camera, and I'd have to have it repaired, and we're not going to go through that. So anyway, I will be using this, especially with an extender, to get really far away stuff probably. This can open up really wide, which is much better. If I were to take the 100 to 400 and put an extender on that, the extender's double your length, well, or times 1.4. It depends on what kind of extender. I just bought this 2x extender, which is nice. That allows me to, if I were to put that extender on this lens, it would turn it into effectively a 600mm. It would also take my f2.8, it would double that to f5.6, which would cut down half the light that I'm trying to get in, meaning I would need to boost it in the camera, or I would need to put more, I would need to boost it in the camera, or I would need to shoot in brighter sunlight, basically. There's only so much I could do about that. The best, fastest lenses, they call them fast because that's the term for it, but it's the ones that can go really open and go really far. I've talked about it before. The 50 to 1000 is the dream goal. That is the lens. There's nothing else like it. They made it specifically. I believe the story is, because there's a lot of press material on it, I believe the story is that someone was like, hey, I want to do wildlife, you know, a professional thing. I challenged Canon to make something better than the current lenses on the market. And they went, okay, we'll do that. And so they made a cinema lens, meaning that it has the ability to zoom in and out, to adjust focus. It's the highest possible quality you can get to that, while also being able to shoot at 50 millimeters, which a 50mm equivalent is your eye. That's, everything is kind of put around that. The depth, or not the depth of field, but the boy, there's a term for it that I can't think of. You don't know what it is, do you? Do you know what it is? I don't think so. I don't remember. I thought about it and I can't think of the right term off the top of my head right now, but basically the width. You know how a wide-angle lens is technically anything below 50 millimeters, because it would be able to see wider than your eye's vision between your peripherals and everything. A telephoto lens is anything that can see further than your eye currently. So again, anything over 50 technically counts as telephoto, I think. So everything I've shown you has been telephoto. Nothing goes below 50. I don't usually shoot on anything below 50 unless I'm trying to get big wide shots. I have hooked up to the Pocket Cinema 6K, which is what's recording right now for the wide shot, I have a 20 to 55 on there right now. Really great, nice cinema lens. The difference between a still photography lens and something that would be specifically made for cinematography or videography would be mostly the ability to manually control certain things. So like that iris that I was talking about, the blades of the iris on the inside of the lens, you can't control through still photography except through the camera. The camera tells it through an electronic signal, hey, here's how much to open or close it. The cinema lenses have a wheel on the outside that you can turn to actually manually control that, which is really nice. All these numbers that I'm talking about are millimeters, 50 millimeter, 300 millimeter, 100 to 400 millimeter. 70 to 200 millimeter, etc. You get it. All of those are millimeters away from where the sensor is. So the further out it is, the further the lens actually is. On a 300 millimeter, it actually is from the end of the lens, wherever the glass is inside. Scientists figured this out. It is 300 millimeters between that point, and then not the end of the lens, but actually where the plane is on your, where the sensor is, the plate on your camera. That is the further away distance it is. So the bigger the number, the further away it is, the further you can zoom. And that's how you get nice crisp footage at a distance. That's why I want, everything I have is pushing for more and more. The more I get, the more that's in my reach, basically. The more millimeters I have in my lens, the more that I can effectively get good footage of, nice, crisp, clear, from further and further away. That's how you see wildlife documentaries, especially the ones I'm thinking of, where they have shot on the Canon 50-1000 that I would love. Again, while I say that's the dream, that is a $70,000 lens. Nothing else I own at all, if you totaled up, everything else comes close to $70,000. That is a amount of money that is just not imaginable at this point in my life. Hopefully one day, but more than likely, if I ever even get to touch one of those, it's because I've had to rent one, which is several $1,000s a day. Again, that's just not affordable. Or I work for a studio that already owns one or rents one because they can afford it, because they're going to go, all right, well, you know, we're going to spend $250,000 budget on this entire thing. We can rent or get this lens for a certain amount of time. And then either they own it or they're borrowing it from someone else or something because they know they're going to get their monies back when they produce a wildlife documentary that brings in millions worth of dollars of revenue. For me, I don't bring in any revenue, so that's just not going to happen anytime soon. If I can get 70,000 people to follow me and they all go, all right, I'll give you $1, there we go, then I can buy it. But that's just not reasonable at this point. So I had to settle for something, which brings us around to the lens that I have been more or less teasing in the background this entire time. It is a 70-200, much like the first one I ever shot on. So is it the biggest, is it the longest? Am I going to be able to get really close? Not really. But I have to live with what I've got. That's why I have a 2x extender on it right now. That doubles it. So basically, effectively, it takes a 70-200 and makes it a 140-400. So I'm still similar to what I had. It won't be quite as much reach as the 100-400 that I was using. But the difference is that this one can go a lot wider. It can open up way more than that one can. If I was fully extended on that, I think I tested it with the extender and everything on there. It's shooting. There's only so much light that it will let in at that point because the number of the f-stop is huge. It's like f18 or something like that. It's a lot, which affects a lot of different things. Again, go ahead and mention this is just kind of a quick overview for someone who probably doesn't know anything about this. I've spent years learning about this. There are a lot of other resources and good YouTube tutorials and people who are professionals who talk about this at great length and can go into a lot more detail. Go learn about that if you're interested. It's fascinating to me, but I am not explaining all those things. I don't want to. But I'm not explaining all of those things. There's far more than I can put into this. I'm not qualified at this point to myself where I'm really interested. And that's also just not what I want to do. I'm not trying to teach other people so much. I don't want to be... That's an easy thing where I see everybody doing that, where they learn the basics, then they turn around and teach the basics, and you wind up with thousands of YouTube tutorials where they're just teaching the basics. I'm beyond that point where I want to learn more advanced stuff. I know all of the basics. I've taken years to learn it all at this point. I want to be learning more stuff. I could easily just turn around and take that stuff and split it into hundreds of videos and talk about each little detail, and that would just get boring for anyone who's not specifically learning. I don't want to be doing that. That's not the point. I want to be out shooting. I want to be out doing things. I want to be learning more. Anyway, the main point of all of that, somehow I got sidetracked, surprise. We're coming back around to the higher the f-stop, the more depth of field you have, which means ideally what you would want, the best kind of thing would be you've got your subject and then you've got a blurred out background behind it. But when you're shooting over really long distances, the more that f-stop number is, the less, like the more that's going to be in focus. So it's harder to kind of solo out and get your subject there and then blur out the background the way you want to. It's just not going to look as good. Doing it digitally doesn't, nah. I would rather do it in the lens. Everything's going to be better when you can do it here instead of trying to just make up for it. It doesn't always look as good. So being able to shoot wider, being able to shoot more open is definitely a benefit. This lens right here that I will put close-ups of. So this lens here can open all the way up to a T instead of an f-stop. It's different for cinema lenses. There is kind of a conversion, but not really. You take what you get. It can go to 4.4. So even with a conversion, no matter what, the 2.8s technically are wider. So I would be able to get more lens, more light through the lens with this. But this is this is what they call a prime lens. It's 300 millimeters. The glass doesn't move. Nothing else happens in there. It's always going to be 300. You can make a little bit more with the extenders like I talked about, but you can't go any less, and you can't zoom in and out with that unless you do it digitally in the camera. Anyway, this one has the ability to zoom. It is a zoom lens. It is a 70 to 200. It has the ability to go from 70 to 200 by actually moving the glass inside or moving the glass in the lens further away from the lens or closer to it, depending on what it is. This is very expensive for this specific one, and the reason why I bought this is because it has a servo motor, meaning that I can do that electronically. So one of the great things about this lens and the reason why I bought it is because it has a motor. It can actually function more so than just a normal lens. It has the ability to zoom in and out, or you can change the settings. It's a whole thing. It's exactly what I want in that regard, so that I can be focusing with one hand and then controlling my zoom or stop and start or whatever I need to do with the other hand. So although I do lose a little bit, it goes back to a 70 to 200. That's why I bought a 2x extender that is on there right now, making it, again, 140 to 400. So it gives me about as best as I can get, and I just have to accept that I'm not going to be able to get any closer, most likely, unless I sacrifice some of the other things. For example, I could put the 300 millimeter on there, and I can use that with a 2x extender to get 600 millimeters. I get no zooming. It's what it is what it is. But I can get a little bit closer, and it's a little bit wider. It's a little bit faster. I keep saying wider. Wide is the wrong word to use. I know it's how wide the iris is open, but the term is fast. They use that for a specific reason, because wide means other things. Anyway, point being, I'm really excited to get to use this. I unfortunately don't get to use it this weekend, but we all make sacrifices. We do what we can. This is just how it is. What's really great about this is that if I do take it off of So another thing that's really useful is if I do take it off of the tripod and I put it on my shoulder and I'm walking around handheld, I can actually control most of the handheld things with this grip over here. So I would be able to look through the viewfinder, focus in on whatever I want. I can zoom in and out, and I can control my focus right here, and I can record. Everything that I need is more or less between here and right here between these controls if I need to make adjustments. Because of that, it's got an image stabilizer. I'll actually be able to shoot handheld, where I really couldn't do that before. It would just be too much. So this has opened up the ability for me to shoot handheld without it being too much of a hassle. And it's also given me the ability to, when I'm sitting down and I can control things, I'm not trying to jump all over the camera, trying to get this, trying to get that, with all these different options for different things. I can sit back. I have two handles, like I showed before. One of these handles is a control handle. It can help me control if I need my focus, or probably not the focus. I usually will wind up manually focused for something like that because the autofocus hit or miss, and when you're doing cinema you want to be able to control that anyway. But zooming, for sure. Being able to zoom while I'm doing my focus, okay, it'll look like this when I'm out there. If I'm doing that, or I could have the screen out and flipped and I could be standing up and doing it. It just opens up a whole world of possibilities while also being able to zoom with a nice control. I can control the speed of my zoom through the bottom of the lens. They've got, there's a setting on it. Or I can actually, I discovered there is on the grip that I have back on the handle, there is a setting there for me to be able to control it. So it has everything that I want with that regard. That is why I bought it. I'm very excited about this lens. I could go on and on more about length, but honestly, because I haven't used it except for testing it down here in the basement, I would rather use it and then talk about it more. But yeah, I'm really happy about that. I'm really excited to get out and shoot with that. I think the combination I've been learning over the last few months, and I think being able to get down, get out early, get into a blind, and sit down where nature isn't going to notice me. Wildlife will, still keep their distance, but they won't be as far away because they won't see a human sitting out there like I used to do. They'll just see the foliage of that stuff, of the blind. Being able to do that and then being able to open up with an actual cinema lens to control all of the things that I want to do will just give me more opportunities. That will be, that'll have to work. That's why I bought it. This, about $5,000 lens. Again, the next one up, technically looking at what I could use for this camera, for what I have and what I want, being able to shoot in 4K without having to get a bunch of adapters and things like that to fit other lenses. The cinema style lens with the servo motor and everything in it. There's one that would be a little bit more. It's like a 25 to 250 and it's like 25 grand. Again, not really possible. And then of course the 50-1000 is $70,000 and the idea. So I don't know, maybe I can start a business at some point if I can prove income coming in. If I shoot different things for companies that are willing to pay, I can prove that, and then I can go to a bank and go, hey, I own a business, give me a business loan, and they'll go, oh, you're not just an individual, you probably have insurance to cover for this and things like that, and a reason to make money. Okay, yes, and then I can buy the lens. That's probably the only way I'll be able to afford it on my own, which is most likely what's going to happen. So I think that's all I have to say about lenses. They are the key point of the camera. You can't do it without a lens. Next time we will talk about some things that I carry, a backpack and things like that.